Aeci is almost twofold. So I think the guiding principle is really staying ahead of the curve, and everything is really founded with or sort of built on the foundation of improving safety, and the rest are sort of additional benefits. So when I say it's twofold, innovation from products and services that we actually deliver to the market, as well as what we're doing internally. And I think the internal bit is really the part that speaks to future-proofing mining. So, when we do look at our operational footprint, be it on the African continent versus in areas like Australia and South America, there are different challenges which need different future-proofing and different approaches. So one of the aspects in Africa that's certainly really critical at the moment is just ensuring that the value chain remains really robust. Logistics networks are in place, and more importantly that we've got access to raw materials. So although it sounds quite trivial, the work that goes on in the background to qualify between 80 to 100 raw material substitutes for our products and services has been an ongoing exercise for the last 2 to 3 years to ensure that we're able to continue delivering the same quality products, services into the industry and ensure that mining operations remain undisrupted regardless of what's happening in the outside world.
In a nutshell, what we're looking at is just improving reliability. So quality products, quality services, high reliability, lowest total cost of ownership for our customers. So shoring up our supply chain in Africa is a big part of that. Looking at innovation, digitalisation, automation in places like Australia where the cost of labour is very high. We're looking at tackling those challenges there.
In the more advanced markets, you're looking at automation and seriously implementing automation and essentially removing people from benches and from underground. Whereas in Africa, we're actually trying to upskill people. So the first step is trying to provide sort of those basic skills taxonomies to get people to a point where they can deliver basic goods and services, and the knowledge transfer from, let's call it a South African company that's expanded across the continent, so the fundamentals, and then also ensuring that we are equipping employees to actually have the skills of the future, so that we're not necessarily always reliant on bringing people like expats in. We really look at developing the communities in which we operate to adopt new technologies and that we can ultimately implement them on the customer side. And that inherently just really drives innovation, because then you've got people who've got the experience, the knowledge and the capability to use various tools. They can implement them at various sites, and then that takes you one step closer to the tailored solution approach, which we're very fond of. We always say our people enjoy problem solving, and with the capability it allows people to push the boundaries as well, and that's something we've always been really, really proud of.
Africa is still very much focused on upskilling and mobilising the workforce. One of the speakers at the opening yesterday from Tanzania, she highlighted the most valuable resource is the people in Africa. And I think that's going to be the story on the continent for the next decade at least. It's all about investing in the people, upskilling them to best exploit the resources. That's quite a similar story in places like Indonesia, where you have high populations and relatively high unemployment. You get into some of the more mature markets like Australia in particular, and it's hard to put people. People don't want to work in mines anymore, so it's those kind of environments that are starting to drive the automation. And I think that's where we're going to see things change the quickest and the fastest from an automation perspective in countries like Australia and North America in particular. Indonesia is the largest exporter of seaborne coal. And I think the mining minister summed up quite nicely yesterday that King Coal's back, and I think that speaks well for Indonesia. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but Indonesia is a very big mining market, some very large copper gold deposits. It sits on the Pacific Rim of Fire, which is a epithermal zone. So it's a very rich area, so large copper gold deposits, and the whole of Kalimantan is effectively a very large island of coal.
So we're really fortunate, and I think it comes to sort of how old the company is. So well over 100 years. So you've got a lot of tacit knowledge sitting within the company. We've got a fantastic R&D team that is not just involved in one portion of the product basket, but the entire range, from some of the raw materials that go into the explosives all the way through to developing some of the software. So the in-house capability is exceptional. There are a lot of partnerships with universities and other industry stakeholders. So if we look at sort of conceptualizing, we love collaboration, and there's a lot of collaboration that goes on with our customers. That gets fed back to the R&D team, and they're able to, in relatively short periods of time, commercialize fantastic products. So one of the great things that we have been working on is we identified, so electronics historically has always been brought in to enhance precision timing, so better blasting outcomes. It controls things like environmental aspects in terms of vibration controls, so you're able to mine closer to communities without creating unnecessary upset. But what we did also find is you are sitting in areas where there's potentially a lot of groundwater, application and discipline is not always great. So one of the improvements that we've recently made on our electronic systems is to increase the pressure resistance. So the industry standard typically sits at 110 MPAs. We've upped that now to 140 MPAs, and what that essentially helps is to overcome what we term EMP, when there is potentially water at the bottom of the blast hole, and that reduces the potential for misfire significantly. But it goes a step even further to that, right? So the ultimate goal is prevention of misfires and ensuring that every single hole goes off. And we've got a wireless detonator which has been introduced into the industry around 3 years ago. And that fundamentally cuts out most of your risks in terms of misfire management and application errors. So it brings with the new technologies of precision timing, flexible timing to get the absolute best blast outcome for the kind of rock mass. But then it also reduces things like on-bench time because there's no more wires to connect and that sort of thing. So it's really just a all-round sort of tick box on bringing the absolute safest, most efficient product into the market, and that comes through a lot of collaboration and understanding what the market requires.
I think the most dangerous part of the sector is in the manufacturing side. So we make very highly reliable products. Obviously you can't take these for granted. You need to handle them with care. But I think one of the beautiful aspects of a company like Aeci is we don't just sell products to the market. We sell services as well. So when it comes to iterating and developing technology, where we can provide our own playground in that aspect. And I think genuinely we believe if we can't extract value out of the technology that we develop ourselves, it's not worth taking to the market. So that's sort of the underlying philosophy. If we can extract value, then it's something that the industry will appreciate.
But I mean, also speaking to innovation, we've had two projects, and the one sort of led on to the success of the other. And it really speaks around innovation and capability and pushing boundaries, and that all being sort of supported by technical know-how. A customer of ours in South Africa was unfortunately, they had a fatality on one of their operations, and they pretty much run in probably the most extreme surface conditions in South Africa. Really hot holes with reactive ground. So, what that essentially means is you're putting product into a hole. When you look into the hole, you can actually see this burning coal at the bottom.
Sure.
And what the team managed to do is, within a 3-month period, develop a product, put it through rigorous testing at a far range where we exposed it to all sort of tests that ensured that we understood exactly how that product performed under the extreme heat. And we were able to commercialize, roll it out to the operation within 3 months.
Wow.
And what that effectively did is it opened up opportunities to mine, and so reserve went into resource, and the mine was able to continue without any disruption and forfeiting sort of any production and benefits thereof, especially at a time when the coal price started becoming favourable. And then that led to the Liver opportunity, which I think Stuart can maybe speak to a little bit more.
Yeah, so Lahare is an epithermal gold deposit in Papua New Guinea. Very, very hot ground. We're talking well over 100 degrees.
Okay.
The explosives will bubble out of the blast holes. It's that warm. And the team was very successful in a recent tender on a technical basis in developing a solution that enabled the the customer to be able to leave the explosives in the ground for an extended period of time. And it doesn't really sound like much, but in practice what that means is all of a sudden you can put more explosives in the ground, you can blast larger shots.
Yeah.
You can leave your drill rigs drilling longer, you can leave your excavators in one location longer. The productivity knock-on effect of just that small improvement of being able to leave product in the ground for an extra 48 hours is massive. And on that basis, Aeci was selected over some of our peers, which is fantastic.
We were able to showcase what had happened from a South African perspective, and the team then went and marketed it, and a lot of collaboration again. There was extensive engagement with the customer, one-on-one sessions with our R&D team, and really understanding what is their requirements, what are their current challenges, where do they want to be in 3 to 5 years time, and then figuring out, do we have a suitable product basket. But I think the beautiful story of that is really it's technology developed in Africa and then taken to the rest of the world, allowing growth, allowing expansion.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you bring ideas back that you see happening around globally, we bring them back this side and we adopt them and ensure that mining on the continent also gets the benefit thereof. So it's really, for us, that's been a great success story. And I think it's one of the most technical operations. So it's a great accolade to our R&D and technical teams that we were able to win that project.
Yeah, we've been operating now for almost 10 years in Australia. I think we've got just under 10% of the market share there now, which is exceptional. I think the team there's done an amazing job, and the market in Australia very much wants to see a third player in that sector.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of people that are wanting to work with us. They see the technical capabilities that we bring. They see the chemistry that the business has been built on, not just in explosives, but in mining chemicals as well.
Yeah.
And they think there's more we can do in that region. Yeah, I think absolutely. We're always looking for those strategic partners to work with. Behind us is an underground explosives charging machine.
Okay.
So that's used to load tunnel headings and also production blasts. Normet is one of our partners that we work with closely, but also in the digitisation space where we're looking for strategic partners. We very much believe in playing within the cycles of the full chain that we specialise in, and that is drill and blast and mineral processing. So we're looking at continuing to enhance our offerings in that space in particular. I think there's been a lot of innovation on the digital front. I don't think you need to develop everything in-house, and I think the fact the world's gone well beyond in-house development on digital products, and everybody's looking for those agnostic systems where you can plug and play as you please, and we're very much supportive of building that environment and letting our customers drive what meets their needs.
So internally we have needs, and externally we've also essentially then got products and services that we can offer. But where it really becomes important is everybody's looking for predictability. So you want to collect as much data as possible, make sense of the data, and have predictive outcomes. So we have a full suite of software that we use for design purposes. There's then a whole sort of mechanism that kicks in post the blast that collects the data and does the assessments and brings it all back into a hub. At the same time, you've got systems that are in place that monitor, for example, if one of our charging units go out and they're charging up a bench, it will physically log how much you put in per blast hole.
Okay.
At the end of the shift, the truck moves out, connects to the cloud, information gets passed, and there becomes a whole sort of reconciliation around what did the plan look like, versus what you actually put into the blast holes, what was the timing plan, what was the eventual timing, and then that gets further assessed along with what did the outcomes look like, and you continuously start collecting that data in a central point. But I think one of the challenges of the industry is to try and figure out who owns the data, because these models are only going to become as effective as the amount of data that you feed into them, and the more sort of robust and accurate they become in their predictions. So that's sort of one of the challenges that the industry needs to figure out. It tends to become
you do a great project for a particular customer, and then when it comes to how are we going to deal with the data and the IP, you get a little bit unstuck. And a second part of that, when you're looking at things like the wireless debt that I spoke about, or even these sort of live systems that track where the vehicles are and how much product is being charged in a hole at a given time. In jurisdictions like Australia, for example, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but there, for example, cell phones are allowed on benches. In Africa, it's not the story. A lot of the legislation is really outdated, and it actually inhibits the fast adoption of technologies. And as industry players, we've got to have a very proactive approach in how do we deal with stakeholders to upskill them, to get legislation up to date, so that we can really bring a lot of the technology that's already waiting to be implemented actually onto our mines, so that our mines can start benefiting from that. So that becomes a bit of an exam question for the industry, and understanding how best we're going to deal with it.
For me, PowerBoost is one of the more exciting products. So that's the booster. So the detonator provides a signal to a booster, which then provides enough energy to set off the bulk explosive column. Okay. The bulk explosive columns are relatively inert, and they need a bit of energy to get the detonation front moving. Typically, those products are made of TNT and PETN, and over the course of the last couple of years, TNT in particular, due to a lot of the instability around the world, has become quite scarce. Okay. So AECI's got a very unique sort of revolutionary booster that is a non-TNT or PETN based booster. In fact, the constituent parts are non-explosive, so we can freight them around the world as just poisonous substances as opposed to dangerous goods, reducing the exposure on our supply chains and put the products right at the customer's doorsteps. And that's what we're really focused on, is putting more modular, low capital manufacturing assets closer to the demand centres. And I think there's going to be a lot of pull for that. So we will be looking at deploying a couple of plants this year, which I think we're all very, very excited about. No, the shelf life is the same. There's no issues there. It's just not until the raw materials are combined does it actually form an explosive adduct. So it's quite unique in that sense.
So I think it speaks to sustainability, number one, in ensuring that you're not dependent on a critical raw material that's really hard to come by, but also just using safer components in your products, especially when you are traveling far distances, and you hear about a lot of these incidents that happen when explosives are sort of in transit, and this is just one of the ways to mitigate that, so that you do protect the communities within which you operate. I think another innovation, and there's one of our colleagues are doing a chat about it today, is the vertical drop. So the vertical drop is something that's well over 10 years old, but it's evolved over time, and we're currently at a point where we are now starting to see more and more of a market pull for it. So essentially what that really does is it allows you to deliver explosives product from surface as close to the working phase as possible. And that has massive knock-on effects like carbon emissions reductions, safety improvements in that. The underground charging units don't necessarily have to be running up and down the decline, so you're not exposing people to machinery that's moving up and down the mine. From an efficiency point of view as well, you're sitting with product near where it needs to be utilised, and therefore you're improving the mining cycle. So I mean, statistically, what we managed to do was, in one of the projects, we actually minimized the CO2 emissions by 93%.
Sure.
We reduced the diesel consumption from over 300,000 litres per annum to just short of 5,000 litres. So that had significant improvements for that operation from a cost perspective, as well as their scope 3 emissions and just general safety of their people. And we've now pushed it sort of even further, and we're able to drop the product down to 1 kilometre, which has a whole lot of science and chemistry involved in the background, but really exciting at this point in time. We've got 2 vertical drop projects kicking off this year, one in South Africa and another in the DRC, which just shows that the technology is now really starting to gain traction within the market, and customers are starting to see the benefit there.
I think and then from a productivity perspective, you've got, more often than not, you've got one way in, one way out from an underground mine. And whenever explosives are either going down the decline or down the shaft, nothing else is transported at the same time.
Okay, yeah.
Right away for explosives. That's generally the number one rule. So being able to take explosives off those main transportation paths improves productivity of those operations. So being able to load that product down a drill hole effectively is a real productivity boost.
And I imagine also safety from point of view of, I presume, less time people have to spend down waiting, so that less time that they're being terrified.
You have a lot of mining companies will be driving these up and down out of the underground mines every day to fill them up. These vehicles are not designed to travel long distances. You increase the risk of overheating, of fires, and just high maintenance. These vehicles are specialist vehicles that want to be at the face loading explosives. And whenever there is an incident, you tend to find a lot of the industry and our peers will support each other. There's no doubt about it. We are in a unique industry. So when it comes to incidents, we want to get in front of that. We want to learn from it. We want to take it out to all of our operations, share any incidents with our customers. Fortunately, explosives-related incidents in the field are generally infrequent, and it's not so much in handling the products, it's the byproduct of that. So it's maybe the engineering design parameters that have gone into the blast have resulted in a lot of fly rock being thrown, and people not being in the right exclusion zone and being hit. So it's sort of the consequence of applying the products that we see most of the hazards presenting themselves now. And look, the industry is moving further and further away from a lot of these sensitive products, and we're exploring that. When again, look, the power boost is a product that plays into this. The most hazardous aspect of our industry is moving stuff on roads. As simple as that. So the less we can do that, the better off we are as an industry and we are as an organisation, because we don't have control or as much control as we would like when we're travelling on public roads. When you're inside the mine site, there's a lot of control. People are driving slower. It's a very controlled environment. But out on the public roads, it's a bit more of an unknown. So we're focused on that in particular.
Perhaps a subject that's sort of relevant is the we've seen a lot in the news around illegal miners in South Africa particularly, but I mean that's a widespread problem. One of the really proactive things Aeci did around 5 or 6 years ago is we started in the gold segment to migrate them from what is termed as traditional cartridge explosives onto underground bulk emulsions. And essentially what that does is it converts the industry from an explosives that's in an explosives ready state that gets transported in that state from the factory to the operation underground, and it's stored up underground, and it's typically applied. It's applied manually, and you use an initiator. We were proactive a good 5 or 6 years ago, where we saw, particularly in the gold area, that the Zama threat was just becoming bigger and bigger, and explosives control was becoming more of a concern. That then became compounded by things like cash and transit heists. So we're now at a point where we've converted the South African narrow reef segment. From a gold perspective, we've done a massive conversion of the gold operations to get them completely off those traditional explosives, to ensure that they're using, number one, something that's more sustainable. It also speaks to what Stuart raised earlier around, it's an emulsion, so it can go down the shaft at any time, not at a specified time, which for our deep level mines is really a critical benefit, in that they need as much time as possible to hoist, right? So,
as Megan said, we're looking at technologies to take types of explosives out of the value chain. So if you go from the detonator, that's the most sensitive item, then you go to the booster, and then you go to the bulk explosives. The bulk explosives is the less sensitive product, the least sensitive product that we have. By taking out the booster in the example that Megan used before, where we're putting less energetic products into the market that people can use for sort of nefarious means, which is important. I do genuinely think the next 10 years is about Africa. I think if all the countries are able to come together and solve some of the logistics challenges that the country faces, and provide a stable regulatory environment for companies to operate, I think you'll see a lot of a thriving mining sector. The commodities are here. I think the access to new greenfields deposits is lesser and lesser. So there's a unique period of time here that I think Africa, if they get it right, it's going to be a very, very, very prosperous decade ahead.
And do you think that's something that could really transform the whole of Africa? I mean, the amount of revenue that's potentially in there could really transform.
Yeah, I think Africa historically has been renowned for its gold production.
Yeah.
Africa is bigger than that, and they can absolutely get onto the global stage with respect to copper production. They can really compete against Chile and Latin America. So I think, in general, a lot of those future-facing commodities are here. I'm personally extremely excited, not just about the explosives business, but the mining chemicals business. We're at the doorstep of great things here, and I think we've got a good team that can really take advantage of it.
We've been around 100 years. I mean, we've celebrated significant milestones. For example, Ghana, we celebrated 30 years last year. We've been listed in Zambia since 1964. We've been in Botswana for the last 30 years. So we've really got an inherent understanding of Africa and how the markets operate. And we've also been through the cycles with them, right? So I think at the moment we're very excited about copper. We're very proud that in the last 5 years, the three big copper projects that have started on the continent, one being the Kamoa-Kakula operations in the DRC, as well as the Mateo operations in Botswana and the KCM operations in Botswana. We were really fortunate to have been part of those operations from inception right through to steady state production, introducing technologies into those regions, new sort of capabilities. You look at Kamoa, it's almost like a state-of-the-art operation using big MCU equipment like this, fully electronic blasting systems, a vertical drop system in place, so really making the most of technology. But the great story there is we've got the local capability to be building all the units in country. The team is upskilled and was able to immediately support the growth and ensure that the country could leverage off the copper boom. And similarly in Botswana, what a great story around assisting that economy, diversifying from diamonds into copper, and not just a surface operation, but an underground operation too. And that was an exciting challenge, and that's sort of where I personally got to see for the first time. It was the first underground mine in Botswana in a number of years, and to try and get skilled people to help the project start off from the ground, and they had a finite time period in which they need to have it up to a reasonable level of production, was a really exciting process. In the middle of all of that, we also managed to build the third in-country modular plant. So we really are excited around all the different opportunities. I think there's a lot of legs, and a lot of work has already been done. You look at the uranium projects in Namibia as well, they're always sort of on this cusp of they're about to kick off, But I think they're a lot closer than what they've been in the past, and we're certainly seeing a lot more movement around finalizing the plans to start things like deployment, and there's actual production plans in place. So I think copper, certainly PGMs, we just hope, right? I think we've all been on the PGM roller coaster more than once in the last 10 years, and somehow PGMs just does always come back to surprise us. But to Stuart's point, what makes us really excited around sort of PGMs is just that knowledge that we've gained through sulfide flotation, and that application being directly transferable to coppers. And that has really helped us also sort of leapfrog into the Central African market, grow our own market share, but more importantly, again, bringing the skills, bringing the products, because your alternative to the production facilities in South Africa is to import from markets like China, and we're just perfectly positioned to service those markets in terms of expertise and skills, but actual, let's call it nearshoring of product, because it's within that SADC realm. So yeah, and we're fingers crossed that, as I said, platinum comes back and that diamonds start shining again as well.
Well, I think one thing that sort of Megan touched on, but it might not have landed, was a lot of people want to sell their products into these markets. We are genuinely 100% committed to investing in the countries, to taking manufacturing closer to the demand centres. And what that's doing, it's giving capabilities to those countries as well. We genuinely want to partner, as opposed to just extract value. Yeah.
I think one of the benefits of Botswana is that that regulatory environment has always been really stable and attractive of investment. Skills level of people is generally really good, and it's probably one of the businesses where we've managed to localize 100%. So for the first time this year, we have no expats in the business, so we've managed to do a total skills transfer.
Wow.
And I think that definitely also does help you secure those contracts, because Botswana as a mining community has also evolved over time. Botswana has done a lot of hard work in really investing in education levels of the people of Botswana and looking for other areas to diversify in. So I think that's been a bit of a collaboration between the two of us, 30 years in country, but it's been a beautiful story because you've had a total skills transfer. We've got 3 plants that are now operating in that country, and as I said, from your senior management right down to the operators, 100% localized. So that's just a wonderful success story in terms of sort of that whole African spirit and Pan-Africanism kicking in. Other markets that I think we're excited for is just Central Africa. I think from a chemicals perspective, if you look at operations like FQM that have just invested heavily in their processing plants, you also look at the DRC and investments from Kamoa into processing plants. So definitely a lot of opportunity from a metallurgy perspective, even in markets like Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe's plant also coming online. So definitely a lot of potential for growth for us, and again, we're perfectly positioned to be able to access those markets. We've got in-country capability as well as the South African support. So looking forward to that. And then new markets sort of entering now. Ivory Coast, for example, looking really good for gold. Morocco is also an area for us that we're looking to venture into from a metallurgical point of view and open up the product basket a little bit. And then you do start getting a lot of inquiries from places like Angola, and I think at this point in time, watching that space to understand what that landscape is going to look like and how do we best participate in it, because again we've got the infrastructure already in place to be able to operate in that area relatively quickly. A lot of companies will have sort of one massive distribution facility or manufacturing facility and export. I mean, we've got operating plants in Zambia, in Ghana, not just emulsion explosives, but shock tube assemblies. Hopefully in the near future, booster assemblies, all the way in Francophone West Africa, similar setup. So we really do try and ensure that you allow security of supply by having those facilities in country, but just also to ensure that you are investing and adding to the whole skills upliftment and job creation within those regions.